Hello everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday, and today I thought it would be interesting to briefly discuss the topic of merchandise because I think it plays a very pivotal role within animation as a whole, and I think it is something that a lot of people I think sort of overlook, considering the fact that it's not directly within the animation, but is something that's sort of a result of the animation. Um, and this merchandise that I'm discussing is across the board, from t-shirts to dolls to stuffed animals to things that have the characters on them, like not just t-shirts, like balloons or different kinds of toys, like on kids uh, items, like for example, you'll have like a little princess house and then it has picture of Belle or whoever else on it. There's stickers, there's pretty much everything that you could probably think of that has some kind of animation label maybe on it. They've got bed sheets, all of that. It's all there. Um, and it's all as a result of the films, in particular, the more popular films. But it's also been within shorts, or like short animated shorts, because merchandise really did start at the foundation, really. Once we started getting main or like actual characters, Felix the Cat being the first. If you look up old pictures, which I did for a project when I was in college where I discussed animation marketing, um, the Felix the Cat was the first um, technically merchandise of animation because it was the first real character. And they basically sold him in sort of like a doll, except in the shape of a cat. So basically I don't know if he was stuffed or not. He didn't really look stuffed. He looked more like, I don't know if he was made out of wood or something, but it seemed like he was um, made out of some. He just looked very bizarrely arranged, so to speak. But really, that was the first kind of advertising, really, and that's what merchandise is for animation. It is advertising. It is like displaying, your your product on a on a wider uh, on a wider base than you maybe initially would by not producing merchandise for the product. So I think it only makes sense that Felix the Cat would be sort of the starting point, considering he was the first technical character of animation, or technically the first character of animation. Now, why is it that merchandise, in particular with animation, is so popular, um, especially among children? Well, it's because it's impressionable to things that are um, that are for them. Like for example, toys. It's very easy to make a doll and sell it and base it off of a character within an animated film, because usually kids, they remember things that are within films and they look at things on a very visual level and they'll see that and they'll go, oh, I should play with this doll or play with this thing because it was part of a film that I enjoyed. And again, they sort of reimagine the film kind of in their mind, and it allows them to have fun and you know just be kids. So I think that's really a huge reason, a really big reason as to why um, animation, as far as merchandise is concerned, is the easiest to sell to its demographic because its demographic is fairly impressionable and it's fairly easy to sell in a large quantity, um, especially to those who have um, seen the film and if the animated film does gain an excessive amount of popularity. But again, we still see animated television shows, with merchandise within the past. For example, SpongeBob at one point got really popular. I remember having SpongeBob um, uh, stuffed uh, characters. Those were things that can be used. Again, it all really just depends on how popular the animated cartoon is. If it is popular, it's definitely going to have some merchandise around it. Um, and even though merchandise does play a significant role as far as marketing is concerned and as far as expanding the brand of the animated cartoon, whether it be a film or a show, um, sometimes I think it can get a little over excessive. What I mean by that is that they'll put practically anything onto it. Um, or they'll have kids, like dress up like you know, princesses and they'll get the whole gist. And I think what it ends up doing is it has a tendency to spoil children, especially if we constantly do give them what they want, which most of the time does revolve around some kind of merchandise surrounding what they like. And a lot of that has to do with animation because that is what children watch. So I think it only makes sense that it would get overused and overdone at times, and we would see things that you really wouldn't see initially for animation being sort of marketed to, um, and and done in like an excessive amount. I would say the most excessive amount of merchandise I've ever seen around an animated film would be Frozen. And again, I am not kidding you. Like when I was growing up in the 90s, I felt there was a lot more variety when it came to merchandising. Like you didn't feel like one particular thing like dominated the entire, section of the children's toy uh, lot. But now Frozen pretty much holds a significant portion of it. And every time I go past these kinds of aisles, I think to myself, all right, I guess they don't want to try to push anything else because this is the thing that gets the kids all giddy. Um, so yeah, I think there are just points where I think the merchandise it further perpetuates the film, and doing so it makes it harder for something new to come along, or something that's actually as good maybe to be merchandised on the same level as another film. Again, there was hardly any merchandise, I believe, on Wreck-It Ralph from what I could gather. I mean, there wasn't a huge amount of marketing on that end. um, and Brave, you see a little bit, but again, not a whole lot. And again, it's the same with Tangled. You see it a little bit, but you don't see it as much as you do with Frozen. And I think largely that's in part because, it won all the awards for Disney. It got them all to the place where they wanted to be, again, within animation. But I think, again, it's just one of those things where, if it's overdone, if it's totally unnecessary, if it's really spoiling your children, then I think that's really when it kind of um, it just rubs me the wrong way. Especially when you see all of these, kinds of, when you see kids, like crying and complaining about not getting what they want, it's just one of those things where sometimes the parents feel forced to buy whatever merchandise. But the thing is you have to put your foot down, I think, at some point and say, look, I mean, we're not getting this bajillionth toy that you already have of the same thing. Like, I mean, they'll sell all these different, just these different kinds of things, like, all these different outfits and, all these different, I mean, I know it's kind of a part of a playing thing that I think girls like to do. They'll play like, characters and things like that. But I think there is just a certain point where, kids can get probably too wound up in the merchandise, too wound up in the materialism, so to speak. And I think that's when it sort of it's sort I just sort of think it ends up being kind of like a bad influence. And again, I think it's a brilliant marketing tactic. I mean, merchandise for animation is like it's like your gold, and it keeps people remembering. And that's the key with marketing. Marketing is all about making people remember. It's all about making them, have it in their head, in their brain. That's the idea behind marketing. It's not, again, it is designed on selling a product, but at the same time, it doesn't force you to it doesn't force you to buy it. It's not like sales where they're like, hey, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, please. With marketing, it just shows you, hey, this is what we have to offer. It's here, it's popular, people are wearing it. You can buy it, you cannot buy it. It's just how it is. It's there. It's just out there in the public. That's all marketing does. Um, and that's what it's designed to be. It's designed to make you remember. And when you see somebody wearing something that identifies a character, people are going to remember. And I think kids are very impressionable with that. And I think they're usually impressionable as to what other kids like. So, um, yeah, I think the merchandising for Frozen really did up the ante, because a lot of kids probably influenced other kids that it was the greatest thing and that they needed to have it and they needed to have it in order to fit in. So that's kind of the thing that I've noticed. It's it just depends on how you balance it out. I mean, if you're really offering something good and you balance out the merchandise, you don't provide an over excess of it. I think then it's okay. Like you're not trying to force it down. And this is where I think marketing does become a little bit more forceful, and that's when the only thing you can really see or buy is within that category of Frozen. If you walk down the aisle, it's complete Frozen, which it's not, but there's a lot of it. Because that's probably in the most highest demand, which only makes sense. But as far as through a as far as animation is concerned, I think merchandise sort of puts uh, it puts a benefit, but then it also provides sort of um, a detriment because a lot of people will get sick of seeing the same thing over and over again. You have to provide something sort of new to the table, and kids are going to ultimately end up growing up, and there'll be something new that comes along. And that's the thing about marketing. It's always about trying to put something new out there, always trying to find new ways into reaching out to people. That's really how it works. And maybe if one approach doesn't work for one person, you try another approach and maybe it does work for them. So it's just kind of how it works, and that's how sort of merchandise works. And they'll just go with whatever is the most popular out there. Um, but I think, though, that's really ultimately all I can say about merchandise. What I do find really fascinating, though, is in particular with Disney products, they have been expanding more into the teens and young adult audience. Largely things like Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse, you know, the Disney films and things like that, the older 2D animated films. And again, you do see a little bit of Frozen being marketed to teens and young adults too. So I think what does this say about animation? Maybe it says that animation is becoming more of an acceptable thing among teenagers and adults. They're not just seeing it as just kids stuff. Um, and they enjoy maybe the design work, the artistry, and things like that, and they want to incorporate that within what they wear. And I think, and with maybe little trinkets here and there. But I think that's where we're seeing sort of the market go as far as this merchandise is concerned. And I find it really fascinating. And I think a lot of it has to do with, again, we have that nostalgia for animation. We have that um, that longing for innocence and childhood that we, had when we were children. And I think a lot of that merchandising is designed around this concept. And I think for in particular the teens and the young adults, and I think it really does work. Um, and it does suit itself. I mean, I have a Mickey Mouse sweater, and I have a Peter Pan t-shirt. I've got things that relate to sort of my nostalgia, so to speak. But again, it's all based around, um, again, building that emotional connection with the audience. If you slap a character on and it looks good, then there'll be a market for it. And that's really what merchandise comes down to. And some people may not like some other films more than others, and they might like one bit of merchandise better than others, but really what it all comes down to is just, again, trying to make people remember, trying to make people go back to the film or TV show, trying to get relevancy. And I think that's what marketing does really well with this aspect of merchandise. Gives it gives the film or show and the art with an animation purpose, so that people remember. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this topic. It's kind of straightforward and it's interesting. I'd like to know what is your favorite thing when it comes to this kind of merchandise with animation. Like, do you have like Mickey Mouse t-shirts or Mickey or Minnie this, or do you have something from Peter Pan, something from, Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White? Do you have something, even Frozen? Do you have something from there too? Are there things within the within children's merchandise that you find ridiculous or or overly excessive? Feel free to let me know. I'd be more than happy to hear anybody's thoughts out there. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this topic. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye. Oh, and speaking of animation, I'll be sure to put a animated short that I did for my for the company that I work for down below in case you want to check it out. But until next time, everybody, bye-bye.